Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian. Today we have a video that's kind of a long time in the making. I did receive this bottle. There was no agreement that I would do any content about this, but as I was tasting it, I had a similarity that I wanted to draw, and so I'm doing it. If they haven't seen this video prior to posting it, what are we talking about today? It is the Raconteur Rye. This is a collaboration between the Woodwork Collective and Dave Jennings, or Rarebird 101. You might be familiar currently with Woodwork Collective because a lot of folks are talking about this other product that they're putting out, this Altschuler & Co. In these older aged bourbons and finished bourbons and whatnot. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about this project of Raconteur Rye. And Raconteur Rye is a 3-barrel blend of 95.5 MGP ryes. They're all over 7 years old, and it is a straight rye. It is a toasted barrel rye, and it's a Mizunara finished rye that previously held 16-year bourbon. And again, if you've been watching the channel this year, you know that I've had a lot of really good ryes so far this year. So I thought this would be really, really good to go ahead and just kind of bring up. I wanted to make sure I got something out about this. The batch 1 that this is already sold out, but I believe they're working on a batch 2. And so I thought maybe it's timely for anyone who missed it, if they're catching up on some of the other folks who were talking about it, or maybe they're like, hey, I saw someone got this, they said it was good, I want to know more about it, that would go ahead and have this video. So why don't we go ahead and just dive in to this bottle. We'll see what kind of things it gives. So like I already mentioned, for me specifically, I feel like, and if you watch my other video, I feel like this has been a fantastic year for ryes. From anything like these 8-year tumbling dices to some of the 11-year whiskeys that we've seen from OKI, Nashville Barrel Company, Brook Hill, as well as a lot of really interesting craft ryes. You've got the Still Austin had a really good rye. We had this Epic Rye out of Maryland. There's a lot of really good rye products that I've been tasting so far this year. So what are we going to get with this Raconteur Rye? This again is 7 years old. It is 60.24% alcohol by volume. Again, a 3-barrel blend, so this is just a hair over 500 bottles for this first particular run. Price point of $129.99. When I first was talking with Dave about this, I said, hey, you might need to give me some idea of what I should be looking for, because I've not had very many Mizunara finished products. In fact, I may have only had one, and that was a Rabbit Hole, really old bourbon Mizunara finish. So I don't actually know. I don't think we know where those barrels came from. So I don't know what the base product was to know what the Mizunara finish did to it. But when I brought that up to him, he said, well, actually, my goal with this was actually to not make a finished tasting whiskey. So interesting then, again, as someone who's not really into toasteds either, we've got just a regular rye, we've got a toasted rye, and we've got this Mizunara finish. And I will say, kind of a spoiler, I don't taste this and say, this tastes finished. This does not taste like a toasted to me. It doesn't taste finished in any sort of way. But let's dive into what it does taste like. While I have you here, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let me know if you've tried Raconteur Rye, or maybe what your favorite rye has been so far this year. Let's see if we could see any legs on here. Not many. There's some slow-moving ones here. You could tell they're just kind of clinging there. There's a few over here. They're moving really slow, especially compared to the Angel's Envy that we saw last video. Kind of a darker golden honey color. And there are two things mainly that I'm picking up on the nose, and it's strawberry cupcakes. So the very kind of dense, spongy strawberry cakiness met with orange slice candies. I feel like the spices are present but subdued because of more candy sweetness noticeable on the nose. And for that reason, I think everything's pretty well in place. It's not too citrusy, but citrus is there. It's just kind of dense, inviting. It's not overly rich, but it definitely has some depth to it, some weight to it on the nose. And definitely candied and fruity and sweet. Let's go ahead and dive in here on the palate. The first thing I notice on the palate, a lot of melon. So I feel like that leans a little cantaloupe, which I've noticed in MGP stuff before, and I feel like it always kind of comes out, and I always really enjoy it around summertime. Cantaloupe, melon, watermelon as well. The palate has some subtle oak initially, but as you keep sipping it, that oak evolves. It gets a little bit more prominent. It kind of sticks around a little bit more. It gets a little bit more intense, a little spiced oak. It just really draws you in. The oak kind of pulls you through the sip. There's definitely some slightly perfumed, but definitely candied citrus. Thinking like lemon peel, like candied lemon peel, like you're trying to make an oleo, or you're mainly just making candied lemon peel as like a garnish or something. Definitely sugary, definitely some citrus there, but it's not overly bittering or getting those oils. It's more on the sugary side. Kind of going back to the melon note, I feel like it moves into like a watermelon Kool-Aid. There's both something refreshing about it, definitely sugary, sweet, playful about it too. There's also this unique savory thing that I can't quite put my finger on that I feel like comes out a little bit more on the nose the more you sit with it, and also is a little noticeable on the palate. Going to the comparison that I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, to me, this particular pour makes me think of Joseph Magnus cigar blend. Now let me explain why. I don't think this tastes like a cigar finish in the usual sense that you see that of like a cognac or Armagnac or even Amburana in that regard. But I say that because this past weekend I was sipping one of the more recent bottlings of a Joseph Magnus cigar blend, and I feel like you can taste very clearly this is MGP bourbon. But there are nuances, there are things about it that make it very deep, that make it a little bit unusual, that someone who wants to seek for that can find, but it doesn't detract from just being a really nice drinking bourbon. And to me, I feel like the Raconteur Rye is like a rye version of the Joseph Magnus cigar blend. And I say that because of these other ryes that I've had, a lot of them are MGP ryes. And I would have to blind this at the end of the year and kind of my end of the year wrap up to really see how it places, because I feel like there's some that I think have more richness and mouthfeel, and some that have more complexity. There's definitely some that are spicier and more citrusy, and there's definitely ones that are thinner. So the Raconteur Rye kind of sits in the middle of those for me. If anything, for being 7 years old, this does give a little bit more of the oak in depth, and maybe a little bit more of that kind of fragrance thing, the perfuminess, as I might say sometimes, that does make it drink a little bit older. And for that reason, I think that it might be able to score favorably, because there's just a little bit more touch, massage of depth and complexity that some of the younger ryes don't necessarily hit. So it strikes this interesting balance of some playfulness of some of the younger ryes, but with some of the interesting character that usually comes with more mature aging. I can't get over, the more you sip it, it does have these little quirky, fun, kind of tropical, funky notes like I might notice in Armagnac or something like that, or some of I got some Calvados, Armagnac, some rums back here that give those just little touches of quirkiness. Now those sometimes are overly sweet, really big profiles, but here there's just a nuance to it that I feel like adds a really interesting side to the rye that maybe some other ryes don't have. If I had to bring up maybe one negative about it, it's that the finish does have a little bit more kind of bittering lemon oil note to it. Normally, what I really love about a pour is that in the long finish, if it continues to develop, if it continues to have these nice present oak notes, or maybe it changes to a lot of brown sugar, or basically what it does a couple of minutes after you have a sip, I always find that a really enjoyable quality if it continues in a positive way. This one here, it does get a little bit bitter. And so this is one that I feel like I would want to more frequently sip on instead of letting it continue to linger over time. But that's the only thing I can really pull apart about it, where all the other characteristics about it I feel like are highly positive. Look, there is a lot of competition this year for really well drinking rye whiskeys, and I'm happy to say I think the Raconteur Rye is definitely in the fold for one of those really, really solid drinking, really good rye whiskey releases of the year. And until the end of the year, blinding these and tasting through, that's the only way we're really going to see how it fares this year. But know that if you end up picking this up, whether you pick up a batch 1 from somewhere, or whether you check out batch 2, you're going to get a rye that has a lot of great sweetness, a lot of great fruitiness, really nice playful rye that also comes with some of the maturity. So it bridges the gap between a lot of things where some of these other ryes that I do enjoy lean more one way or the other. Really enjoyable rye. Really glad I had a chance to try it. Really hope it's helpful for you all as well. Thanks everybody for tuning into another video. Hope it was insightful, informational. If there's other things you all want to hear me talk about in future videos, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what I should be diving into. Thanks as always everybody for tuning into another video. And until next time, we'll see you all later.